Good morning. I'm Carmen McBride. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to First Unitarian Church, where our mission is to explore the eternal, nurture community, and pursue the common good. We welcome you in your brokenness and in your wholeness. No matter who you have been, who you are, or who you are becoming, we greet you today with love. I'd like to extend a special welcome to everyone who is watching us on YouTube this morning. During the prelude, please introduce yourself in the comments section and let us know where you're joining from. If you're in Oklahoma City, what neighborhood are you in? Or if you're somewhere else, what city are you in? And now, the prelude prepares us for worship. We light our chalice in our building in Midtown, Oklahoma City, on land that was home to indigenous peoples, including the Apache, Caddo, and Wichita, on land that was taken from the Muskogee and Seminole and other removed and relocated peoples. We light the chalice as a symbol of our sacred time together. The burning chalice represents the light of reason and science, the warmth of loving community, the cleansing heat of justice, and the flame of hope.
Good morning. I'm Sundra Flansburg, a member of this church for almost 20 years. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a white woman of a certain age. I originally wrote this service to be part of our church's lay-led summer services and was to give it at the end of July. While I thought right up until the week before that I was going to be ready, fortunately, more level heads than mine told me I needed to step back and let someone else take that spot so that I could focus on my mother's care. They were right. As it turns out, she passed the day before I originally was to do the service. I had wanted to do it when she could have come, just like for every other service I've led here, but that was not to be. So, Mom, this is for you. Reverend Diana handed me a challenge when she invited me to take this day, a date that many of us longer-term congregational members know as our revered Pat Corley's annual labor service. I don't know how many of those wonderful services he organized, full of old-time religious hymns, nostalgic memories of a past we may or may not have actually lived, moon pies, and RC colas. The choir wore hats and the ladies' gloves. But we lost our cherished friend and #1 supporter of this church 2 years ago. No one could, or in my view should, try to resurrect that Labor Day service. It was so uniquely Pat. So Pat, this is for you as well. Finally, I'm grateful to Reverend Diana for the challenge she made in her sermon last Sunday. This week, when I reread what I had written back in July, I realized that in that first attempt, I was kind of failing to capture the spiritual part of my topic, my feelings of wonder and connection that are what really draw me into the incredible world of trees. So though I was first sad to not be able to give it in July, and I take this Labor Day date with some degree of trepidation, I'm really grateful for being able to speak today and with the benefit of having heard the wise words of Reverend Diana last week. I remember an eon ago when I was in 6th grade, what it was like moving up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Driving from Iowa to Michigan, from west to east across the UP, it was the first time that I remember feeling immersed in forest. In Iowa, I had been accustomed to city life and tilled fields. As we drove that long highway with tall, thick trees on both sides of us, we were entering a different world. The first few months there on Whitefish Bay, we lived in a cabin right by a serene lake, enveloped by forest. It was a different world, and I have fond memories of what it was like to smell the earth and leaves, feel the breeze coming in from the water, and discover tiny, almost invisible lichen and fungi in rainbow colors everywhere I looked. My 6 years in Costa Rica were another kind of experience entirely, discovering the diversity of rain and cloud forests and jungle of every type. But I began to get more curious about 6 years ago after reading Peter Wallenben's The Hidden Life of Trees. That book started me on a quest to learn more and more about the new research that has revolutionized our understanding of trees and forests. A leading researcher is Suzanne Simard, a groundbreaking forester whose research is encapsulated for the layperson in her book, Finding the Mother Tree. Being my father's daughter, I found learning about the science fascinating. But while my mind is engaged heavily in imagining the world around me differently because of the science, it is really the feeling of connection and wonder that I get that draws me into a different way of living in the world, when I open my soul and heart and feel. Last year, I undertook a year of reading about trees, forests, and fungi, and it was a fascinating journey. In this service, I've asked Carmen to do some readings from just a few of those sources to help ground us in some of that thinking. And I hope to share some of the things I find fascinating about this new understanding and what I believe it can teach us.
I
A reading from Wise Trees by Verlin Klinkenborg. Humans have always been framed by trees, from the original savanna onward. As Emerson put it, they nod to me and I to them. So imagine inhabiting a world where the largest trees are only shoulder high and live just a single human generation, 20 to 25 years, considerably shorter than the average human lifespan. Suppose, too, that they decompose after death as swiftly as we do. Picture yourself walking among the forests of that strange arboreal world, gazing across the treetops like a giraffe in an apple orchard. How would it feel? How would it change your conception of who you are? In our world, we're dwarfed, outlasted, even humbled by trees. What little modesty we have as a species may depend partly on that fact. Every Sunday, we take an offering. Since 2002, all the cash and designated checks from that offering have gone directly to external nonprofit organizations doing good work, our Change for Change partners. For the month of September, our Change for Change partner is the Roe Fund. This fund helps low and no-income Oklahomans obtain reproductive services, including abortions, referrals, and information. Grants are paid directly to abortion providers. For those of you who are in the sanctuary with us today, in just a moment we'll be passing the offering plate. If you're not able to make a gift today, we invite you to write a letter of encouragement to our Change for Change partner organization, and we'll share those messages with them. And if you're watching us online, please make your gift by sending a check to First Unitarian Church, including on the memo line, Change for Change, or make an online payment through 1UC.org.
Many summers, oh, elm tree, you've seen many summers and seen many winters, but still you stand so strong. Oh, elm tree, you've seen many summers and seen many winters, but still you stand so tall. Oh,
Our next reading is from Professor Suzanne Senard's book, Finding the Mother Tree, Discovering the Wisdom of the Forest. My query started from a place of solemn concern for the future of our forests, but grew into an intense curiosity, one clue leading to another clue about how the forest was more than just a collection of trees. In this search for truth, the trees have shown me their perceptiveness and responsiveness, connections, and conversations. One of the first clues came while I was tapping into the messages that the trees were relaying back and forth through a cryptic underground fungal network. When I followed the clandestine path of conversations, I learned that this network is pervasive through the entire forest floor, connecting all the trees in a constellation of tree hubs and fungal links. The biggest, oldest timbers are the sources of fungal connections to regenerating seedlings, the old and young perceiving, communicating, and responding to one another by emitting chemical signals. The older trees are able to discern which seedlings are their own kin. The old trees nurture the young trees and provide them food and water, just as we do with our own children. It's enough to make one pause, take a deep breath, and contemplate the social nature of the forest and how this is critical for evolution. The fungal network appears to wire the trees for fitness and more. The old trees are mothering their children. When mother trees, the majestic hubs at the center of forest communication, protection, and sentience, die, they pass their wisdom to their kin, generation after generation, sharing the knowledge of what helps and what harms, who is friend, who is foe, how to adapt and survive in an ever-changing landscape. It's what all parents do. After a lifetime as a forest detective, my perception of the woods has been turned upside down. With each new revelation, I am more deeply embedded in the forest. The scientific evidence is impossible to ignore. The forest is wired for wisdom, sentience, and healing.
Susan Simard, throughout her career, has studied mycorrhizal networks and revolutionized the way we understand forests as more than just a collection of trees. You heard in the excerpt that Carmen has just read that over the course of her career, and now through her students, Simard found that trees can communicate with each other, warning each other of dangers. She found that different tree species actually work together to help one another. For example, sharing extra nutrients with other tree species at times when they need it. As we learn more about forests, how important the diversity is, how trees care for their own kin and for other trees across species, it inevitably makes me reflect on human communities. Because in our healthiest spaces, we are doing the same things. We all need help sometimes, and we can all give help sometimes. We take care of our own families, but in vibrant communities, we work to take care of all the young within and outside of our families and neighborhoods. And in our communities, as in forest it turns out, diversity makes us stronger. It brings different skills and understandings to the challenges we face. As Simard says, mother trees give their kids a head start, but they also tend the village to ensure it flourishes for their young. This support of the young and the community is also found in a fascinating way with mother trees, the longest established, most connected trees in the forest as they age and die. Simard and her students have found that as those trees near the end of their lives, they push their own nutrients out into the wider mycorrhizal networks and also directly to young seedlings. Knowing this, How can we not think differently as we step into a forest? Knowing how much we share, how can we not recognize trees as kin and be reminded of our connections and responsibilities?
And words from Merlin Sheldrake, from The Entangled Life, How Fungi, or Fungi, Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds, and Shape Our Future. One of my collaborators, a professor at the University of Marburg, told me about a sculpture he had seen as a child. The vertical Earth kilometer is a brass pole 1 kilometer long buried in the ground. The only visible part is the very end of the pole, a brass circle that lies flat on the floor and looks like a coin. He described the imaginative vertigo it had triggered in him, the sense of floating on an ocean of land, looking down into its depths. The experience inspired his lifelong fascination with roots and mycorrhizal fungi. I feel a similar sense of vertigo when I think about the complexity of mycorrhizal relationships, kilometers of entangled life jostling beneath my feet. The vertigo really sets in when I try to scale from the very small to the very large, from the microscopic, trading decisions taking place at a cellular level, up to the entire planet, the atmosphere, the 3 trillion odd trees that make their lives on land, and the quadrillions of miles of mycorrhizal fungi that weave them into relation with the soil. Our minds aren't good at keeping their balance when faced with numbers this big. Mind-boggling, isn't it? Yet the story of mycorrhizal relationships makes many such dizzying swoops, from very large to very small and back again. And from Rebecca Solnit and her book, Orwell's Roses. There's an Etruscan word, seculum, that describes the span of time lived by the oldest person present, sometimes calculated to be about 100 years. In a looser sense, the word means an expanse of time during which something is in living memory. Every event has its saeculum, and then its sunset, when the last person who fought in the Spanish War, or the last person who saw the last passenger pigeon is gone. To us, trees seem to offer another kind of saeculum, a longer time scale and deeper continuity. From shelter from our ephemerality, the way that a tree might offer literal shelter under its boughs. In Moscow, there are trees planted during the Tsarist era that grew, shed their leaves in fall, stood steadfast through winters, bloomed in springs through the Russian Revolution, shaded visitors in summer in the Stalinist era, through the purges, the show trials, the famines, the Cold War, and glasnost, and the collapse of the Soviet Union, dropped their leaves during the autumns of the rise of that admirer of Stalin, Vladimir Putin, and that will outlive Putin and Sam and me and everyone else on the train with me that November morning. The trees were reminders of both our own ephemerality and their endurance long beyond ours. And in their uprightness, they stood in the landscape like guardians and witnesses.
Both of these readings capture a bit of the feeling of how trees and their communities can take us out of our human-scaled way of feeling and understanding things. I can think of a tree on the homestead property of my father's side of the family that was there before my grandparents homesteaded in Caddo County. We know it's been there at least 120 years, probably more. It was there when Native people camped by the creek on the property. It lived through the Dust Bowl when my grandfather lost parts of his land piece by piece. It still stood when times got better and my grandfather managed to achieve his dream of buying back every piece of the original homestead he had lost. As kids, my brothers and I played under it in its shade during the long, hot summers we spent there, just like my cousins, and earlier my father and his siblings had done before us. We'd pick cicada shells off the bark, We think about trying to climb up in it, but I always sense that there were things in its giant branches that might be a little scary. The tree offers a saculum going back and forward several generations of my family and before. Quaking aspens, sometimes called trembling aspens, are another. Quaking aspens are a kind of tree that propagate through their roots. They grow in what are called clonal colonies. Each colony shares the same root system, and each aspen is a clone of the original. Because of this, each colony is considered one organism. There's a colony in the US called Pando that is considered to be the heaviest and oldest living organism on Earth, 6 million kilos and somewhere around 80,000 years old. That colony has been around from before Homo sapiens began migrating from Africa. Richard Powers, in The Overstory, writes poetically about something else that happens when we take this long view of the earth, the long view that trees can give us. From the storyline of his Suzanne Simard-based character, he writes, "She stands in the clearing at the top of the rise, looking out over a shallow gully. Aspens everywhere. It boggles her mind that not one of them has grown from seed. All through this part of the West, few aspens have done so in 10,000 years. Long ago, the climate changed, and an aspen's seeds can no longer thrive there. But they propagate by root, they spread. There are aspen colonies up north where the ice sheets were, older than the sheets themselves. The motionless trees are migrating. Immortal stands of aspen retreating before the latest 2-mile-thick glaciers, then following them back north again. Life will not answer to reason, and meaning is too young a thing to have much power over it. All the drama of the world is gathering underground, massed symphonic choruses that Patricia means to hear before she dies." In closing today, I'd like to leave you with several thoughts that arise from our growing understanding of trees, with some questions to ponder. Thinking about trees on this continent that were here before Europeans made first contact, does your perspective on our rights and responsibilities while here in our lives change in some way? Imagine yourself a mother tree. What are you doing individually to sustain the children and young people in your neighborhood, in the wider community around you, across lines of species? And finally, what can we do in community, in our church, with other churches and organizations that will help all of us thrive? What would that community look like? How would it help us all thrive? Thank you.
Please join us in the congregational hymn, the Gray Hymnal number 175. We celebrate the web of life.
For
We extinguish this chalice flame, but not the light of love and community which continues to burn in our hearts.
And my gift to this community today is an early end to this service. I want to just offer, Bob and I had some bounty of trees to share with a few people. There's some wonderful peaches that anyone who would wish can take a few. And another reminder that the memorial service for our long-term member and chorister George Bauer is at 2 o'clock today. All are welcome to join us for his celebration of life. To end, some words from Richard Power's Overstory. This is not our world with trees in it. It's a world with trees where humans have just arrived. Trees know when we're close by. Trees have long been trying to reach us. Are we ready to listen and learn?